Hi, this is Chantel, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about medieval architecture and then some about the art of the period. This is an image of the Hagia Sophia. Hagia Sophia means holy wisdom in Greek, and it is a building that's located in Istanbul, Turkey. It's a pretty fascinating building because it's a central monument that was Byzantine initially, and it was the central focus of the Eastern Empire, the Eastern Orthodox Catholic Empire, and then was later converted into a mosque. And so it's been a focal point for both the Byzantine Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And so it's got a pretty rich and wonderful history. It was built in 537 as a basilica, and you can see that it's got some of that same architecture as we looked at some other basilicas last time. It was so it was a basilica and a Catholic church until 1453. And then in 1453, the Ottoman Empire decided to convert it into a mosque, and that's when the minarets were added. And then it was secularized in 1935, and it's been a museum ever since. Let's take a look at a few more of the images here. Hold on. Okay. There we go. There's an interior image. It's the Byzantine architecture in this, and the gilt work and the mosaics were pretty phenomenal. There were a lot of images in here of Christ and Mary. They've restored a few of them, but after it became a mosque, those images were covered up, and a lot of them were replaced by script instead. Because, and I believe Dave talked to you a little bit about the iconoclast controversy, the script saying that you cannot have, that you shouldn't worship graven images, and the Islam still holds to that pretty strictly. And so it's okay to have beautiful script, but you don't have the have images of people. And here's another view of the interior of the Hagia Sophia. It is an enormous building. You can see here, these are a couple of the hallway entablatures here, and they were just covered up. And so they have since been restored after it became a museum. So we have, but you can see this mosaic work and the very stylized human figures. Because again, the goal was that we needed the figures to tell the stories, to communicate images and ideas, but they weren't supposed to be too real. They weren't supposed to be so that you worship the images themselves. They are just symbols and reminders. And here's another mosaic from this era. This was a mosaic in a Byzantine cathedral from about 300 AD. Again, you can see the very stylized vantage here. Very flat, very, not attempting to make this real. Also in the Middle Ages, we see a lot of symbolic movements, gestures. The stylization is also symbolic, that communicates a lot of things. Art historians who study this era understand like what all the symbols mean. I unfortunately do not, but people at that time did. They would understand what these symbols meant. Again, we've got Mary and the infant Christ. You can see that he's not really proportioned like a baby. It's almost like a mini adult. Again, the hand gestures and the holding the book, etc. Very strong symbolism there. This is another view of a Byzantine church, and you can see that it's very similar to the Hagia Sophia. Let's see here, what do we have? My screen is kind of cutting off here. There we go. This is, these both are catacomb paintings. We've got Samson and the Lion, and then over here in the corner we have the Raising of Lazarus. These were paintings from about 300 to 400 AD. They were down in the catacombs, underground. That's where Christians gathered at this time. Before Constantine recognized Christianity as a religion, it was kind of seen as a funny little cult, and the people sort of gathered secretly to discuss and worship. And so these were some of the paintings that were found in some of the catacombs. This is a mosaic that was in an apse of a church, approximately 432 to 440. And again, you can see that it's very symbolic, very flattened, not making an attempt for reality at all. This is part of a gilt frame from that era. Again, you can see, you know, symbolic hand gestures here, and again, not a strong push toward trying to depict a real person. It's very symbolic in nature. We see more images happening, and we start to see more illuminated manuscripts. This is a manuscript from about 1063. We have Mark over here, and then we have Luke and John. No, this is still from the book of Mark. Sorry, I'm a slide ahead of myself here. And illuminated manuscripts started becoming something that we see more and more. What would happen is one church or one cathedral might be the house of certain texts, and you would send one of your monks from your church over to their church. They'd go on a long journey, and they would live in that monastery, and they would copy the texts. And as they copied the texts, which was a long and extensive process, they would also illuminate them and do beautiful adornment to the text, because again, it was part of the recognition of the sacredness and the holiness of the text, and decorating it was also a way of showing love for God. Here we have some manuscripts from the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells, and we'll look at a few other images from the Book of Kells and some other pieces. This is what's referred to as insular art. We see this a lot in 7th century Britain and Ireland. It's a really interesting phenomenon because it is a fusion of Celtic, Germanic migration, old beliefs, Christianity, Anglo-Saxon. It's all kind of fusing together, and so the different groupings and their various symbols come together. And so we have a lot of Christian texts, but they're adorned with things that were sacred to the pagan peoples in the North Country. This is another from the Book of Kells, an illuminated manuscript. Again, we see a lot of this intertwining, scroll work, this knot work, dogs and dragons and snakes are very prevalent in this style. Another from the Book of Kells, very, very ornate lettering, and the illuminations, the illustration is just quite extraordinary. I think this is another one from, or I'm sorry, those other ones were from the Lindisfarne Gospels, and this one is from Book of Kells. And then we go into, let's see here, this is, where's my note? I believe this is St. Francis from about 1235. Again, you can see that his proportions are exaggerated and not intended to be a real picture of what he looked like. It's a symbol to help you remember sacred scripture, because again, you would read this because most people were illiterate at the time. This is by Cimabue. It's a Madonna image from about 1285. Again, very flattened. It's become a little more ornate and a little more attempt toward, capturing folds of fabric, etc., than we had in the Byzantine, but still very flat and symbolic. This is a detail from A Last Judgment by Cavallini. This is from 1293. You can see, though, that we're starting to get a little more realistic in this. We're still pretty flattened and primitive looking, but we're starting to push that envelope into a little more realism, which we're going to get into quite a bit more as we get into the Renaissance and we start to recognize the humanity of religion and of beliefs and of artwork. This is a very ornate pulpit from about 1302 to 1311, seen in the church. They seem to feel a little more comfortable with sculpture, having some more realism to it, but still it was somewhat flattened and symbolic in nature. This is from Duke de Berry's Book of Hours, about 1412 to 1416 approximately. This is January and February, followed by, here we go, this is, I believe, August and September. They were images just showing what life was like and what people did in those era. This is sort of North Country, and again, we're starting to get more realistic in our imagery. And this, let me move my little screen up here. This is Van Eyck's Ghent altarpiece. It's a pretty famous piece. Later in the Middle Ages, kind of in the High Gothic era. In the Gothic era, we see more imagery of Mary. And again, we're starting to see like some pretty strong highlights and shadows. And the images are starting to look much more realistic in nature. And this is going to soon lead us into the Renaissance. And if you notice, their stance is much more realistic in nature. It's we're starting to understand the human body and what's happening with it, and appreciate shadowing and realism. And this is from the Bayeux Tapestry. The Bayeux Tapestry was actually not a tapestry, it was an embroidery. And it was about 70 meters long. It's still extant. It was made in England and later transported to Bayeux, France. And it is, it's essentially a book. It tells a full story in it. And I think perhaps Dave can bring up the Wikipedia page and sort of scroll it across for you. This is just one small segment. It's a pretty phenomenal piece, very long and ornate. And I think that's about it, especially because my recording will cut me off in 15 seconds. So I think that's all. Thank you. and I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day.